Hello, hello, my friends. AmyR here with Prairie Paper and Ink. Welcome back to my face and my card making space. More cards using the latest Pretty Pink Posh release. My previous video, I'll have it linked in the end screen anyway, used other products from this release. And I was kind of following along my same sort of formula that I did in the last ones with this one, except this time I'm using the Tea Time set, which is super cute. And I will post a link to my coffee series playlist. I'll put that in the end screen at the end of the video. I've done a lot of cards over the years, either coffee themed or tea themed, because coffee's not for everyone. And I just included them all in the same playlist. And it's been a while. I can't remember the last time I did a coffee themed card. I think I've done like several tea themed ones, but I'll pop that in the end screen as well. So at the very end of the video, in the end screen, I'll have the previous Pretty Pink Posh video I did and then that playlist. And yeah, simple watercoloring with distress inks that I think anyone can do. We did some stenciling, splatter, of course, all the things. I will have links to the new release as well as all the supplies I used in the description box below the video. My links are affiliate links. That just means that if you click on one of my links, end up placing an order, I do get a little kickback from that at no extra cost to you. That is what helps, pays the bills, keeps the lights on, enables me to keep bringing out content. And yeah, that's enough chatter from me. Let's get into actually making the cards. So I'm not only using the Tea Time stamp set, I'm also using this little mini set called Simple Thanks. And I'm going to use the two sort of leaf sprigs from the Simple Thanks. I thought they'd be nice little sort of filler images. And I have some distress watercolor paper in my MISTI. And I'm just lining up all of the stamps onto this, making sure there's enough space between everything because I'm going to die cut them with their coordinating wafer dies when I'm done. And then I'm going to use my anti-static powder tool on these. As always, these images don't have to be heat embossed, even with this Nocturne ink that I'm using. I just prefer to heat emboss my images, especially when I'm going to do any sort of watercolor, because the heat embossing, it gives the raised edge to all of the stamp lines, and it keeps things a little bit more contained, and then I don't have to wait for areas to dry. I can just color, watercolor wherever I want, and we're good to go. So I'm doing everything twice because why not? Once it's all lined up, just grab a second panel, stamp it with the VersaFine Clair Nocturne ink, and then I'm using just clear embossing powder, sprinkled that over, tapped off the excess, and then I'm going to melt this with my heat tool. And then once everything is smooth and melted, I'm going to remove all the stamps from my MISTI, and then I'm going to line up, like I'm going to put the panel back into my MISTI, and there are these little like floral stamps in the Tea Time set, and yeah, I'm going to decorate my little teapot and the teacups. They have a little floral design. I thought that was super cute. I thought that was so cute. So I'm going to line these up right over the two little teacups and the teapot, and then same thing, anti-static powder, stamp the images with the VersaFine Clair Nocturne ink, coat with the clear embossing powder, repeat on the second panel, and then quickly melt those as well. So then they've got patterns. And then another, as always, I need more hours in the day. You all know, I say it all the time, but I thought it'd be really cute with these to do like paper piecing, like the teapot and the teacups, and then pattern paper. I've done that in other videos with other, stamps. It would be so cute, Any like small scale pattern paper would work really well for this. But stamped and heat embossed, and then we're going to do very simple watercolor with distress inks. And I listed all of the colors that I used. I went with more of a like red and blue and yellow combo this time. Not usually my norm, but I thought I'd mix it up a bit, So I'm just smushing my little mini ink pads onto my palette. Just any non-porous surface is going to work. And then I do add shimmer to my palette using my Nuvo Aqua Shimmer pen. I did this in the previous video as well, except I forgot about it. So I add the shimmer and then I do all the watercoloring and forget, but I'm going to add it. I remember at the end, so I'll just go over it and I'll show that when I get to it. But I've got all my colors, and then I'm just using my go-to, my little tiny detail water brush, the same one I have been using for, I honestly do not remember how long. I think I've had this specific water brush for over a decade at this point. I don't even know. It's been a long time. Just a regular little paintbrush and water works as well. With a paintbrush and water, you do have a lot more control over the amount of water, you know? That is the only thing with water brushes, is they're a little bit finicky. But off to the side, off camera, I always keep a cloth or paper towel, not only to wipe my brush between colors, but also to soak up any extra water, because that's what I mean by when I say finicky with water brushes, is sometimes they're great and other times they're like gushing, like drippy, you know, it's just is. But I like the convenience. I really do. So I'm just working my way around, filling in all these little areas. And the florals is where I wanted the shimmer. But I was like caught up painting them and totally forgot. And I showed in the previous video where I just swirl the brush in the color and then in the little puddle of shimmer that I had added to the palette and paint that way. You could also paint with the Aqua shimmer pen, like skip the water brush altogether, swirl the shimmer pen through the color and paint that way. I almost never do that because I don't want to risk my shimmer pen like soaking up too much color and contaminating like the inside, and then that clear liquid is no longer clear. So that's why I do it the way I do it, and that just works. But yeah, I forgot to do it, but I'm gonna come back to it because I wanted sparkle on these, because why not? So with all of the painting, I kept it pretty simple, like one color, other than like the brown icing on the cake slice. I mixed the vintage photo and ground espresso. And then for the red florals, I mixed the festive berries and the worn lipstick. And then for the greenery, I'm mixing the crushed olive and the peeled paint. And now I'm going back and adding the shimmer. So I'm just taking the ink color, swirling it, like picking it up with a water brush and then swirling it in that shimmer and then painting it, which always, with my camera filming straight down like this, you can't see anything. But at the end of the video, I'll tilt this in light and use my little flashlight so you can see the little sparkly bits. And I kept it contained to just the florals and the couple little detail elements on the teapot and the cups, and that was it. Everything else I left like as is. So there's only a hint of sparkle to these. A little more demure. So once these were dry and I'd done the second panel off camera, I'm going to use the coordinating wafer dies for everything and die cut all of these images. So getting them all lined up, and then die cut everything, and then I'll go on to the next step once I've got these cut out and set aside. So both sets have coordinating wafer dies, and line them up, run them through my Empress die cut machine, and then set them in a tray, go on to the next step. So after I got all of these images die cut and set aside, I'm going to work on my backgrounds, which I used Nina Desert Storm cardstock, my go-to craft cardstock, and I cut down 2 panels to A2 size, so they're 4 1/4 by 5.5 inches. And I'm using the layered Teacups stencil set. It's only 2 stencils, so super easy. And for this, like, I call it the base stencil of the cups, applied it over the craft cardstock, and then I am pouncing white pigment ink over this. So that was specifically why I chose the craft cardstock, so I could use white ink, and then, you know, you got your little white teacups, like, just super cute. So I'm going to pounce that on. And then for the detail stencil, I am going to use the same distress inks and little blending brushes. I will say that the blending brushes with the distress inks did pick up a little bit of this pigment ink. It wasn't enough to concern me, but I did notice it. A little bit of the pigment ink transferred to my brush and then transferred to the ink pads. Again, small amount, not enough to make me like, oh no, I wrecked my ink pads. But this is what I'm talking about with like blending brushes, tools, etc. When I say like you don't mix what you use for like oxides or pigment inks with dye inks because it can transfer. This is kind of proof of that. However, these were such small areas, and I'm not like, it's not like I was pressing my brush like into the pigment ink pad, but I noticed it. So when I was done with these, I took my brushes and I just vigorously rubbed them onto a cloth. If I had really contaminated my brushes, you know, and really got a ton of pigment into them, I would have washed them. But I've talked about that before. I don't wash my brushes. I am too lazy for that. But again, these didn't pick up enough of that pigment ink that it's like going to ruin future ink pads, anything like that. I noticed it just a teeny bit. And I was like, okay. I already knew that was a possibility, but it's always good to know that I'm not crazy and giving like bizarre advice. So after I stencil my little backgrounds, and they're so cute, like that stencil set is adorable. I love it. So after I stenciled them, I put the panels into my spot box, and then I'm going to use some of my white gouache. So I put that onto my little palette. I'm going to add a bit of water to thin it down, and then I'm going to splatter these backgrounds just to add that bit of texture that I love. So swirled that with water using my little fan brush, and then I'll splatter this across both of these backgrounds. Didn't add a ton, but you know, just a decent little amount, just like so. So once I've got these splattered, I'll clean everything up, let those dry. While the splatter was drying, I die cut some ovals from white cardstock using an oldie but goodie favorite, the Eyelet ovals die set from Pretty Pink Posh. Those will kind of be my little frames. And then I also grabbed a scrap of red cardstock, and I'm going to stamp the little thanks sentiment from that Simple Thanks set. So I used my anti-static powder on the cardstock, and then I stamped the thanks word with that same white pigment ink because it was just sitting there, and then coated that with white embossing powder, tapped off the excess, and then I can melt that with my heat tool. And then once these sentiments are, you know, smooth, shiny, melted, I'll use my little microfiber cloth to buff away that excess anti-static powder because it shows up on dark cardstock. I never bother to use, like, to wipe away the excess anti-static powder when, like, at the beginning when I did it on the white watercolor paper, because you can't see it. It doesn't ever seem to affect my watercoloring, anything like that. But on color cardstock, dark cardstock, etc., that powder shows up. So I just buff it away with the microfiber cloth and then die cut it with the coordinating wafer die. And then I've got my little scallop oval with the piercing detail. Perfect also for a tea-themed card. It made me think of a doily, you know? So I'm going to wrap some baker's twine around this panel. And as always, reverse tweezers for the win. So I wrapped the baker's twine around the panel, made sure I had, my knot started in my bow off to the side so it doesn't like get in the way of the die cut oval when I adhere that. And then, start the knot, use the reverse tweezers to pinch the knot close so I can sit and fiddle, get my bow the way I want it. And once I'm happy with it, I can pull that tight and then remove the reverse tweezers, pull it tight again, zhuzh it a tiny bit more. And then once I'm happy with it, trim off the tails. And there we go. So for the oval, I'm going to pop this up with some Big Mama foam tape, just to give it a little bit of dimension without like a ton of bulk. And I'm leaving a gap after that first little piece of foam tape there for the baker's twine. So this will also just help the oval to lay kind of flush, like properly. So put the Big Mama foam tape on there, pop that into place. And then I'd kind of figured out my arrangement while I was waiting for things to dry. So all I had to do now was to just start adhering. So I've got all my little elements, and I'm going to use a combination of just craft tacky glue and little thin foam squares to adhere all of my little greenery filler and my little teapot and all its little accessories. Like, I can't get over how cute this is. So adhered my little filler, and then thin foam squares, again, gives it a little bit of dimension without making my card like super bulky. So get those popped into place, and then I can start, assembling my little, teacup and saucer and little spoon. Like, I can't get over it. And the cake, that little cake slice was just adorable. So worked my way kind of around this entire arrangement to get everything adhered into place. And then once I was happy with this arrangement, I just copied it for the second card. Sometimes I'll mix up the layouts and change things, but the way these images are, everything, there was no point. I did that in the last video, and it was kind of fun because it makes them look, a lot more different. But sometimes, honestly, I'll just do two of the same thing, 2 for 1. So the sentiment I just adhered with the craft tacky glue, repeated it on the second card front. And then inside my cards, so my card bases are top folding A2 white note cards, 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inches. And they're just white cardstock. And on the inside, I'm going to stamp the teapot with the Speckled Egg Distress ink. And then I'm going to take a sentiment from the Tea Time stamp set, and I'm going to line that up, and I'm going to stamp that with the VersaFine Clair Nocturne ink. Because y'all know I love me punny sentiments, and this one that says, "You're terrific." I was like, perfect, love it. So inked that up, stamped that on the inside, and that finished off the insides of the cards. So once those were stamped, I then adhered the card fronts to the card bases, and gonna add a little more splatter, just cuz. Wanted to add a little black splatter. Again, just cuz. So I put my black gouache on my little palette. I had these back in my splat box here. Added a bit of water, thin it out with my fan brush, and then add just a bit, not a ton, you know, just a smidge. I know. Some people really don't like the splatter. Some of you I've converted. I welcome you all to the dark side. And then some are just on the fence, and that's okay. You know, if we all did the exact same things and all liked the exact same things, man, how boring would that be? But I love my splatter. I like the texture it gives, and I don't know, especially the black splatter. I don't know why. I enjoy making a mess, I guess. Anyway, splatter that onto the card fronts. I let that dry. I immediately cleaned off my palette and my brush. Gouache is water reactive, so it's easy to clean up even after it dries, but that stuff is heavily pigmented, so I clean it up immediately. Otherwise, huge mess. Anyway, after everything was dry, I used my another oldie but goodie favorite, the little pretty pink Posh clay hearts. These came out a million years ago. And I just picked the red ones out and added just a couple of them to each of these cards just to finish everything off. And then all I had to do was pick them up with my little embellishment wand and just adhere the little hearts into place with little dabs of craft tacky glue. And once these were adhered, I just got to let the glue dry, and these cards are complete. So, like I mentioned in the intro, I will have links to everything in the description box below the video, so you can just expand the description box and everything will be there. Oh, and then I'll show you guys the sparkle with my flashlight. So the little floral elements and whatnot have, you know, that bit of sparkliness, plus the shine from the embossing powder. It just gives it that little extra something too. So, yeah, links to everything will be below. And then in the end screen at the very end, I'll link to the previous video I did, as well as to my coffee series playlist. And yeah, thank you all so very much for hanging out with me, for thumbs upping and commenting. It really helps a ton, and I very much appreciate it. Subscribe if you haven't. I would love to have you over here. And I will see you all very soon in the next video. Bye. Thank you so much to my amazing Patreon supporters. For anyone that might be interested in joining my Patreon community and supporting me, the link to my Patreon is in the description box below the video. For everyone else, as always, thank you all so much for taking the time to watch my videos, for thumbs upping, commenting, subscribe if you haven't. I'd love to have you. And here's a couple other videos for you to check out in case you missed them. Bye!